Hello and welcome to my Yugioh channel. Today we're going to be looking at the secret rares within the brand new mini box for Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, the King of Vermillion. Ally of Justice Catastor is a dark attribute machine type Synchro Monster. It's level 5 with 2200 attack and 1200 defense. It requires 1 Tuna and 1 or more non-Tuna monsters. And the effect is, at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a face-up non-dark monster, destroy that monster. The best thing about this card is that happens at the start of the damage step. That means the second you go into your attack declaration, you can instantly destroy your opponent's monster, if it happens to be a non-dark. This pairs well with a continuous trap card called DNA Transplant, where you can make everything on the field a certain attribute. So if you just have the 2-card combo, you can instantly make everything, say for example, a light attribute, and therefore you can constantly guarantee that this card's effect is going to work. And remember, it's not just when this card battles, but when something battles into this. So if one of your opponents is attacking into this with a non-dark monster, the same effect applies. Armory Arm is a light attribute machine type Synchro Monster. It's level 4 with 1800 attack and 1200 defense. It requires 1 Tuna and 1 or more non-Tuna monsters. And its effect is, once per turn, you can either target one monster on the field, equip this card to that target, or unequip this card and special summon it in attack position. While equipped by this effect, that target gains 1000 attack. If that target destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the destroyed monster in the graveyard. I love this card, and it is very underestimated for what it can do. Firstly, it's an equipped card, basically in a Synchro Monster. It gives 1000 attack points. You might be saying, okay, what's so significant about that? But it can make the difference between a lot of different monsters, and it can equip to basically anything. It doesn't have to be a specific type of monster, it doesn't have to be a Synchro Monster, it doesn't have to be an Xyz monster, it can be anything you wish. So long as it can be equipped, that's fine. The better part of the effect is actually its secondary ability to be able to inflict lots of burn damage. This, on top of any monster's physical attack points, can be enough to either OTK or to put yourself in a position where your opponent has very few life points. I think this was used in the anime by Yusei in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and it was paired with his Nitro Warrior. Nitro Warrior has the ability where if it attacks a monster, it's able to then switch a monster from defense mode into attack mode and then go into another attack. It also benefits that if a spell card was used in the turn, it gains another 1000 attack points. So you imagine if you paired Nitro Warrior with this card, the amount of initial damage from battle damage that you can do, plus the burn effect damage from this might be enough to instantly destroy your opponent. The other thing is, there was another card which was called Junk Barrage, which does basically the same thing as this card does in a equip spell, but it does half the amount of damage based on the monster that you destroy. So total up all of that damage, you've gotten very easy OTK. Tuning is a normal spell card with the effect, add 1 Synchron Tuna from your deck to your hand, then send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. This is a particularly powerful card to be used within Yusei's deck. Most of his monsters have some kind of recovering effect. I think he paired this a lot with his Junk Synchron, because when a monster was already in the graveyard, he could basically summon Junk Synchron, and then if it was level 2 or lower, he could just special summon through Junk Synchron's effect. So he usually would go into his Armory Arm or mostly Junk Warrior by this. This effect is actually slightly different from the anime effect. I think it was a case of, depending on the Synchron Tuna that you actually added to the hand, you had to send that many cards times its level. So for Junk Synchron, that would be, since it's a level 3, you'd actually send 3 cards, but I think they thought this effect was a bit too broken, and at least there is the chance that you might not mill the correct card off the top of your deck to benefit from this effect, so they wanted to kind of balance the card out a little bit more. But even so, even if you're not going for this type of play, always being able to search for things like Quick Draw Synchron, that's a level 5 that can actually special summon itself from the hand by discarding a card, and usually you discard something like Quillbot Hedgehog, is always a good way, because then you can go into a level 7 Synchro Monster. Mechlord Emperor Weisel is a dark attribute machine type level 1 with 2500 attack and 2500 defense. And its effect is, it cannot be normal summoned or set, it must be special summoned by its own effect. effect. When a face-up monster you control is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. Other monsters you control cannot declare an attack. Once per turn, you can target one Synchro Monster your opponent controls, equip that target to this card. This card gains attack equal to the combined attack of the monster equipped to it by this effect. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell card as a quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So this is one of the 3 Emperor monsters, well, the Machine Emperor monsters that were used by the Emperors of Ideasta. So you had 3 variations. This was kind of the mid-range one. You had Skeel, which had 2,200 attack. You had Weisel at 2,500, and you had Grinnell, who was equivalent to half of your opponent's life points when it was summoned. So at a push, you could get it to about 4,000 attack points. That's why it was kind of deemed the most powerful of the 3 boss monsters. This is quite an unusual summoning condition. It has to rely on something being destroyed by a card effect, so you can actually trigger it yourself. There are some support cards that let you do this, so it's not as difficult as you may think it is. It being a level 1 with those stat lineup is very bizarre as well. Typically, to meet these types of conditions, you have to have some very obscure cards and some usually very specific cards to be able to actually meet any of these conditions. So in that respect, it's not too difficult to summon, and you're getting a very decent body monster onto the field with relatively little consequences. The thing about it being able to steal Synchro Monsters is neither here nor there. Whilst it's a good ability to have, and it's actually very useful against certain decks, especially those including Yusei and Jax, which are currently running around in the Duel Links meta. There will be a point where that might be kind of forgotten about and people won't be siding those cards in. That's why I don't think this is necessarily that great as a target, especially if your opponents are using Exceeds monsters or Fusion monsters. This card just becomes a 2,500 attack monster, which in itself is fine. But for me, my favourite part of the effect is the final part, which is negating once per turn an opponent's spell card. Now, a lot of duelists tend to use spell cards to help create situations or create advantages. If you're able to negate your opponent's first card, or whichever card you want to, that puts them in a difficult position because they might not have a follow-up play to that, and that might actually force them to go on the back foot and act defensively, in which case you might be able to win the duel from that. Even if you don't win, being able to shut down one of your opponent's immediate spell cards means they're always that one card less in terms of advantage. Resonator Call is a normal spell card with the effect add one Resonator monster from your deck to your hand. So this was the card that I mentioned before, which is similar to tuning, which helps Yusei out. Resonator Call helps Jack Atlas's deck out because it just adds a Resonator monster. It's a very simplistic effect and is very useful, especially when used with Red Resonator, which can special summon itself, or with another one. I think Chain Resonator is very good with it as well. Depending on your situation, you might be able to take advantage. And actually, even if you use just the typical Dark Resonator, it does have that once per turn protection from being destroyed in battle effect, which might be enough to protect your life points for that turn. Fortismo, the Mobile Fortress, is a field spell card with the effect once per turn you can special summon one Mechlord army monster from your hand. Now, similar to the Mechlord Emperors, the army versions are Skeel, Weisel, and Grinnell, and they all have attack stats to them. The most powerful of which is, I think, it's Weisel. I think that's got 1,800 attack. Then you've got Grinnell at 1,600, and you've got Skeel at 1,200. But my concerns are the summoning effect of Grinnell is when it's normal summoned, not when it's special summoned. Therefore, if you do use this effect, you're not getting those additional effects that you might wish to use. So it's probably good for like a rank 4 Xyz play. Other than that, or spamming the board, it's not particularly useful. Old Entity Yugioh is a fire attribute pyro type synchro monster. It's a level 4 with 2,200 attack and 200 defense. It requires one Tuna monster and one non-Tuna monsters. Its effect is, if this card is synchro summoned, you can return all rank 4 Xyz monsters on the field to the extra deck. If you fusion summon using this card as a fusion material, you can draw one card. An Xyz monster that was summoned using this card on the field as Xyz material gains this effect. If it is Xyz summoned, you can draw one card. So what this card does is it actually rips apart all rank 4 Xyz monsters on the field. So if your opponent is playing a Yuma style of deck where you'll have things like Utopia, Go 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 Cowboy, and maybe Heroic Challenger Excalibur. I've seen some of those being run around in Yuma's deck as well, especially for the time being. That means you can actually send those cards without having too much of a cost. The attack stat on this card is okay. 2200 isn't bad for a level 4 Synchro Monster, and it's one of the only couple of Synchro Monsters that you have that are level 4. The ability to draw an additional card, I say, is neither here nor there. It's fine as an ability, but relatively speaking, it's a meh ability, really. You've got only slots available for up to 7 extra deck cards. There's definitely things you'd rather fill that in rather than this card. Yugioh Tuna is an Earth Attribute Beast type Tuna level 1 with 800 attack and 600 defense. Its effect, when this card is normal summoned, you can special summon 1 Tuna from your hand or graveyard, but it has its effects negated. This is actually quite useful if you want to use it in comparison to summon Red Nova Dragon as an alternative option if you don't want to just build on the Resonator archetype, which is a sub-archetype of Jax. It's a decent enough monster. I mean, if you're trying to go into like a double Synchro Monster, that's fine, because then you're having the ability to adapt levels a little bit as well. Because if this is a level 1 and then you need a level 8 monster, then you can like 2-step it. My only concern is it's really weak, and there are better tuners already in the game, so I do feel this is one of those that is going to be forgotten very quickly. Stardust Wish is a continuous trap card with the effect, once per turn, if a Stardust Synchro Monster you control is tributed to activate its own effect, except during the damage step, you can target that monster, special summon it. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this effect's activation. Monsters special summoned by this effect cannot be destroyed by battle while in attack position. Right, so this card is actually very useful for the Stardust archetype. Most of the Stardust monsters tend to use their effects to tribute themselves in a way where this can actually help to revive them. That's kind of one of the main weaknesses of Stardust Dragon, because if you can force your opponent to use Stardust's effect, you essentially leave your field open for attack. That means they won't be getting their Stardust Dragon back until the end phase of that turn, in which case, if your opponent already has the monsters ready to OTK you, you will never meet this condition. At least by having this card, you're able to bring back your Stardust Dragon. It becomes immune to certain, well, from battle destruction as well, even though you are taking battle damage if your opponent's monsters happen to be a little bit stronger. But also, they can't respond to the activation of this trap card, which means they can't instantly Mystical Space Typhoon or Cyclone or Cosmic Cyclone it. So you do have that level of protection that is necessary. And the final secret rare is Crimson Resonator. This is a Dark Attribute Fiend type Tuna, level 2 with 800 attack and 300 defense. If you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. If the only other monster you control is exactly 1 Dark Dragon Synchro Monster, you can special summon up to 2 Resonator monsters from your hand or deck, except Crimson Resonator. You can only use each effect of Crimson Resonator once per turn. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, except Dark Dragon Synchro monsters, the turn you activate either of this card's effects. So the good thing about this card is, again, it's a Resonator monster. It's one of the more powerful ones. Similar to Red Resonator, it's there designed to special summon other monsters and put yourself in a position where you can get your Red Dragon Archfiend into your Red Nova Dragon. The flexibility comes actually from the ability to access the deck rather than just purely your hand or graveyard, as you can then bring out another level 2 Tuna monster and then go into your Red Nova Dragon. It doesn't really have any limitations outside of it having to be within its own archetype. You can't really think of that many Dark Dragon Synchro monsters. I'm sure there's a few. There's like Void Ogre Dragon, probably a list of other cards. I think I actually have a list of monsters that actually meet this requirement that are level 8, which I will link in either in the description or a card up above. But other than that, you don't really have anything currently in Duel Links that can kind of splash with this card. It's a decent and essential part of his deck, and definitely something you want to be running. So what do you guys think of these cards? Is there anything in particular you enjoy? Is there anything that you think is a bit too weak? For me, personally, I do like the Crimson Resonator, and I do like the Resonators in general. I think they're necessary for the deck. I don't have anything that I particularly didn't like within the secret rares, maybe Yugioh Tuna as an example, but whatever you think, leave those comments down below. Make sure to like the video, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.